Everyone. Thank you so much for joining us and welcome to today's webinar, Tackling Feral Hogs in Fragmented Landscapes. I'm Abby, the Product Support Specialist here at Brig, and we are super happy to have you here today. Let's get started by introducing our guests for today. We have Dr. Marcus Blum and Jay Long from Texas A&M University. So Dr. Blum is a statewide wildlife specialist and assistant professor through the Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service, where he focuses on mitigating negative wildlife interactions and damage while also helping landowners achieve their management goals. His background includes extensive research on big game species and a PhD from the University of Nevada. And Jay Long is a project coordinator with the Texas A&M Natural Resources Institute, where he focuses on feral pig management and education across Texas through state-supported grants. His background includes management of public hunting lands and public hunt state park properties, and a master's in wildlife science from Texas A&M. Also with us here tonight is our very own Dr. Aaron Sumrall, who is our Director of Outreach and Education and Research here at Brig. And so now, without further ado, I'm going to give it over to Aaron. Feel free to take it away.
Thank you, Abby. I appreciate it. Guys, I do appreciate you, Jay and Marcus, for being here today. A couple of things of what we want to do before we turn the mics over to you is today what we're going to do is Abby and I in the background will be monitoring questions from any of the attendees today. So if you have questions as Jay and Marcus cover content, if you would put those into the chat, if you'll see the chat, depending on your device, either at the bottom of the screen or the top of the screen, if you see your chat feature there, what I want to make sure is that everybody knows where that is and how to log that in. That question is just really quickly put in the state that you're logging in from. Where are you at? So quite often we get people from around the world, Marcus, and they're kind of curious to see where some of these folks are. So if you would, for those of you that are attending, put in where you're at. I see somebody just popped in right there that's joining from Massachusetts, Marcus. So that I don't know if Jay's ever been there or not, but that PhD is going to get him out there a lot of places he may not have ever been. Some places he may not want to go, right? But with that, that's something that what we're going to do today. Again, like I said, we'll cover this in the background for you, so y'all can focus on content. And with that, then guys, I'm going to turn it over to you, and Abby and I are going to go dark.
Sounds good. Yeah, Jay may be more familiar up there, huh? Well, no, my wife's from New York, so I get around there a little bit. Marcus Blum. Thanks for that introduction, everyone. I think they kind of covered it pretty well, so I think we're just going to jump into it. Pardon me, Jay is sharing his screen, so I'm just going to tell him to advance slides as it comes up, and yeah, then whenever he gets in, you won't have to listen to advance or click or whatever word I decide to use. But yeah, if we want to just jump on into it, Jay, you want to advance? All right. So if you're watching this webinar, the chances are you are pretty familiar with feral hog issues that we face throughout the United States. Nevertheless, today we're going to start off with some brief introduction to the topic. We want to make sure that we're reaching a wide-ranging audience to increase the effectiveness of our discussion. We're going to start with brief discussions on feral hog distributions, fragmentation of the landscape in Texas, feral hog ecology, and damages associated with the species before we jump into a more in-depth look at the challenges that we face in fragmented landscapes in Texas and various management strategies that we utilize across the Lone Star State. And that's where Jay will jump in. He's going to take over once we get to the management actions stuff. But with that, let's jump into the topic. Jay, if you want to advance. All right, so feral hogs represent one of the most successful and destructive invasive mammals in North America. Their presence in the United States dates back to the 1500s when Spanish explorers introduced domestic swine to the southeast as a portable food source, and later introductions of Eurasian wild boar for sport hunting occurred in the early 1900s, which further expanded their genetic diversity and adaptability of the species. Over time, interbreeding between through over time through interbreeding between escaped domestic pigs and wild boar. And these hybrid populations that were created as a result are capable of thriving in a wide range of ecosystems from the coastal marshes of the southeast to the oak woodlands of California. So, for much of the U.S. history, feral hog populations were confined primarily to southeastern coastal states, which you can kind of see in this graph here with the 1982 counties of feral hog distribution in blue, and then 2024 is going to be our historical, and then historical is going to be yellow, and 2024 is going to be red. That's our newest distributions. But they were primarily confined to places like Texas, Florida, Georgia, South Carolina. However, since the 80s, the range has expanded rapidly northward, and westward. Today, feral hogs occupy at least 38 U.S. states, with established breeding populations across the South, Midwest, and parts of the West Coast as well. And that expansion has been driven by multiple factors, including intentional releases for hunting, natural dispersal, and accidental transport associated with agriculture and livestock operations. And so, as you can see, over time, that main extent becomes more occupied. The populations have increased in Texas alone from around 1.5 to over 2.5 million in the early 2020s. And today, feral hogs are found in nearly every Texas county, with the highest densities being in mostly the central and eastern portions of the state. Jay, if you want to advance. So while feral hog populations have grown exponentially across Texas and the U.S., we've also witnessed increasing land fragmentation across the state. Okay, so since the late 90s, Texas lost about 3.7 million acres of working lands. That's a big chunk. And so we saw a decrease in about 6.7 millions of grazing lands alone, although that's been partially offset by increase in acreage devoted to wildlife management. Programs like the wildlife tax valuations, 1D1, have shown to be very effective in incentivizing Texans to manage their lands for various wildlife species, including the small acreage landowners. And actually, that's where we've seen the largest increases. As we've seen this fragmentation, we're seeing increases in landowners taking advantage of this tax valuation program to manage for wildlife species on their smaller properties. Jay, can you click real quick? There should be another picture. Oh, no, it's the next one. Sorry. If you can go back. Or no, I'll just finish. Although this program has helped, we're still seeing rapid declines in working lands, primarily surrounding our major population centers, as you can see in the map. And this map is from the NRI's Texas Land Trends report. Now we can advance the next slide. And so while these maps indicate working land loss across the state, there's definitely a noticeable risk of increased fragmentation closer to our major population centers. And those of you not familiar with Texas and our major population centers, those are going to include Austin, San Antonio, Dallas, Fort Worth, and Houston. And the trends are mainly attributed to massive increases of individuals moving to the Lone Star State. So to give you some perspective on that, from July 23 to July 24 alone, we saw an increase in the state's population by over 500,000 individuals, good for the third highest growth rate in the nation. Okay, so many of those individuals are moving closer to our major population centers for work, but are still interested in purchasing their little piece of Texas. And that's resulted in landowners with large continuous swaths of land selling the properties to real estate development and converting what may have been hundreds to thousands of hectares or acres to 2 to 5 hectare homesteads. A nice click now, Jay. A nice example of that is shown in this figure on the right of the slide, where we see the amount of fragmentation that has occurred in Bexar County, which is home to San Antonio, which is the 7th largest city in the U.S. So you can see here from 2004 to 2024 just how much fragmentation has occurred from this area. And this is also available in Natural Resources Institute's Texas Land Trends report. So ton of fragmentation there. You could see larger continuous acreage, and now it's basically suburban. Next, Jay. All right, so however this trend, and go ahead and click twice. However, this trend exists throughout the state. Here's an area close to some property my family owns deep in rural Texas. What was once thought of as nice country living has turned into neighboring properties, um, selling their 50 plus hectare ranches to small subdivision of folks purchasing 3+ hectare plots to get away from the city living. And so, as you can imagine, this constant conversion of larger tracts of continuous acres to smaller homesteads can pose significant challenges to wildlife management, including feral hog management. These challenges lead to more chaos in our management of wild habitats and reduce the effectiveness of our state agencies at managing our native populations. And we're going to get a little bit more into these challenges a little later on. Next slide, bud. So now we'll jump into a little ecology. Again, I imagine a lot of people are familiar with this, but I'm still going to go over just in case not everybody is. As we're all likely aware, feral hogs are among the most adaptable and ecologically influential large mammals in Texas and the U.S., certainly. Their success stems from a unique combination of behavioral intelligence, omnivorous feeding habits, and high reproductive capacity. Adult sows can produce 2 litters per year, although this will vary regionally. And they're going to average 4 to 6 piglets per litter, and juveniles can reach sexual maturity within 6 to 8 months under favorable conditions. That lead to growth when they're greater than 100 pounds. So basically, they're going to reach that maturity closer, like 100 pounds plus. This rapid reproduction turnover allows populations to recover quickly following control efforts, driving continual population growth across much of the state and the nation, and thus seeing all the expansion that we've seen throughout the United States, including Texas. Ecologically, feral hogs function um, as habitat generalists. They thrive in environments ranging from bottomland hardwoods, forests to coastal marshes, and even mesquite savannas that we'll see in South Texas and those other semi-arid brushlands. They're going to favor landscapes that offer both dense cover and reliable water, especially that reliable water aspect in places like Texas. And those riparian corridors as well, which can serve as they offer both dense cover and nice travel routes and foraging zones for individuals moving between areas. Radio telemetry studies in Texas alone have shown that hogs often restrict their daily movements to within 1 to 2 miles, but that can travel several miles for foraging and dispersing, and so that can be really challenging once with all the extra fragmentation that we're seeing on the landscape. As we move from 1 or 2 contiguous properties to maybe 30 or 40 now. Jake, go ahead. In the presence of habitat fragmentation, feral hogs may alter behavior and movement strategies. However, most decisions will still be driven by access to food and water sources, right? Feral hogs' general behavior serves them well in those increasingly fragmented landscapes, unfortunately. In some situations, these areas may provide year-round access to resources that may not have been previously available on a more contiguous landscape that was managed for livestock use predominantly. As with native species like white-tailed deer, feral hogs are primed to take advantage of this increasingly urbanized landscape. Yay! Cockroaches and feral hogs will certainly be the last remaining species on the planet following an apocalypse. So while feral hogs certainly display a variety of behavioral strategies in response to urbanization and fragmentation, high-quality resources in fragmented locations when resources are limited on the landscape will ultimately result in feral hogs exploiting these superior resources. So when associated with areas with increased fragmentation, feral hogs often they often concentrate activity where high quality forage exists and is adjacent to escape cover. Across those landscapes, sounders may restrict home range sizes and movement patterns in response to those more concentration of resources. And similar to use of large exposed agricultural fields, feral hogs should select habitat types that provide them readily accessible escape cover. on fragmented properties, which is going to increase the amount of disturbance in areas with increased edge habitats near valuable resources. So basically on those forest edges and stuff, for when you're closer to those nice ag fields or hay fields, it provides the escape cover and everything they need. So they're going to hit that a little bit more. Jay, go ahead with that. Okay, so feral hogs act as ecological engineers, reshaping plant communities and soil processes through rooting, wallowing, and trampling. The rooting disturbs the soil surface, often exceeding 80% of ground cover in localized patches, and directly reduces our herbaceous biomass, litter cover, and seedling survival. In Texas and other southern states, those disturbances promote early successional or invasive plants such as Johnson grass, while suppressing native perennial grasses and forbs. So they're essential for both our livestock and wildlife populations. And this could be beneficial to some species, but detrimental to others. Repeated disturbance disrupts the natural successional trajectory, unfortunately, of rangelands and forests, leading to that patchy bare ground. It's also vulnerable to erosion and runoff. In forested systems, hogs are going to damage saplings and consume mass, thereby altering mass-producing tree regeneration dynamics of favoring less desirable woody species. Many studies have found that feral swine disturbance can negatively influence the diversity of woody plants in the ecosystem. This has been done all throughout the Southeast, including Texas. They also compete for acorns and other mast species with native wildlife species such as rodent, squirrels, white-tailed deer, etc. And these periods are typically resource limiting times for native wildlife and may lead to increased negative population level or negative population level effects during drought and other times of resource limitations. Next. Okay, so beyond vegetation loss, feral hog activity modifies key ecosystem processes. Rooting increases bulk density and reduces soil infiltration capacity, affecting hydrologic cycles. Some studies have found imbalances in carbon nitrogen ratios where feral hogs are present, so basically resulting in accelerated rates of nitrogen mineralization by accelerating litter breakdown and elevating nitrogen in the soil. In riparian corridors, hog wallows and crossings elevate sedimentation and bacterial contamination with bacteria like E. coli, which can give water quality issues for livestock and humans. They also disrupt faunal communities directly. They prey upon ground nesting birds, reptiles, amphibians, and in some cases, mammals. In Florida and Texas wetlands, camera trap data has documented significant reductions in amphibian and turtle abundance following hog incursions. Competition for acorns, tubers, and mass can directly affect our native ungulates in Texas specifically, such as deer and collared peccaries, just by reducing forage availability. Go ahead next. And feral hogs also cause basically, feral hogs cause widespread and costly damage to agricultural systems across the southern United States, right? So their omnivorous diet and rooting behavior destroy row crops, pastures, and hay fields, especially corn, sorghum, peanuts, things like that. A lot of our cereal grains. Studies in Texas, Oklahoma estimate per acre crop losses exceeding $40 to $100 per acre when hog densities are high. And rooting not only uproots the seedlings, but also damages the irrigation lines, fences, and field infrastructure. Also, driving your tractor across the landscape and busting any of your mechanical parts from hitting those ruts. That's always fun. Yeah, and in rangeland systems, hogs are going to degrade improved pastures and native grasslands, reducing forage availability for livestock and creating uneven terrain that complicates the mowing and baling operations. Next. So nationally, feral hogs cause an estimated 1.5 to 2.5 billion in annual damages, including over $1 billion in agricultural losses alone. In Texas, producers collectively lose more than $870 million annually to crop and pasture damage. Beyond which is half of the number right there. I mean, beyond direct losses, producers face indirect costs from vehicle collisions, disease surveillance, fence repair, tractor repair, just mechanical repairs in general, as well as control efforts such as trapping and aerial gunning. Which is a fun one that I think Jay's going to get into. Feral hogs also pose biosecurity risks to domestic livestock through potential transmission of diseases like pseudo-rabies and swine brucellosis. When combined with ecological degradation of rangelands and water sources, these economic and biosecurity threats underscore why feral hog management is both an agricultural and environmental priority. Cooperative cross-boundary control remains the most cost-effective path forward. While feral hogs continue to be a serious management challenge across the southern portion of the U.S. and developing problem in the Midwest states and beyond, the way of that the challenges are managed will differ from state to state. The U.S. is unique in the fact that each state has its own wildlife management agency, and such the laws and regulations can look vastly different from state to state. In Texas, feral hogs are classified as exotic livestock per our agricultural code. Because of this, the regulations around the management of feral hogs are very few. In Texas, there's no season, no bag limit, no means of take restrictions, and oh, I'm sorry, I didn't tell Jay to click. There's no season, no bag limit, no means of take restrictions, and on private property, there's no requirement for a hunting license. Obviously, this is very different from most states across the U.S. While this system of management might not be appropriate for every state, in Texas, the economy for feral hog hunting is strong, and that certainly influences some of the management decisions made. Some of the management tools we touch on here in this talk may not be possible for your state or may look differently, but it is important to note that no matter what the regulations look like for your state or country, a collaborative management approach that includes multiple management methods will most certainly have the best outcome. So feral hogs present one of the most complex wildlife management challenges in modern North America, particularly across the highly fragmented private lands that dominate the southern Great Plains and southeastern U.S. In Texas alone, more than 95% of the land is privately owned, with an average property size of less than 200 acres. And that's mostly going to be in our central and eastern counties. When you get to the southern portion, we're going to see much larger tracts of land. But this ownership mosaic creates a logistical and social barrier to coordinated management. As you can see from the image on this slide, and from the previous slides, there are a variety of land use systems in place and many small parcels of land that likely provide opportunities for this resilient species to avoid harvest and further expand their populations. Jay, you can go again. So feral hogs are highly mobile, intelligent animals that routinely range across multiple properties in a single night. Telemetry studies have documented nightly movements exceeding 2 to 5 miles, especially near riparian corridors, crop fields, and oak savannas. When property boundaries are small and management is inconsistent, these animals easily move between treated and untreated areas, undermining control efforts and leading to rapid recolonization. This creates what ecologists describe as a source sink dynamic, where unmanaged parcels function as population sources that continually replenish adjacent areas where removals occur. So small properties also limit the tools and logistics available to landowners. Arrow gunning, large corral traps, or baiting operations require access to hundreds or thousands of contiguous acres to be effective. On 50-acre parcels, it is rarely possible to implement those methods safely or cost-effectively. Dense fencing, scattered ownership complicate travel routes for control teams and often require multiple permissions before traps or helicopters can operate across the landscape. Fragmentation also intensifies edge effects, the interface between pastures, woodlots, and developed areas that hogs exploit for cover and foraging. These habitats provide ideal conditions for nocturnal rooting and refuge, particularly near water or suburban gardens. Ultimately, property size and fragmentation create a mismatch between the ecological scale of feral hog populations and the social scale management authority. The result is a disjointed approach where success on one property rarely translates into meaningful population reductions across the landscape or across the broader landscape. Overcoming this mismatch requires collective participation, shared access agreements, and coordinated timing of control efforts across property lines. In this sense, fragmentation is not only a spatial challenge, but also a social one. demanding that landowners think and act at a landscape scale to achieve lasting success. Next slide. Perhaps even more challenging, the biological and logistic barriers of the human dimensions of feral hog control. Landowners' attitudes towards hogs vary dramatically. Some perceive them solely as pests that damage crops, pastures, and fences. Others see them as valuable hunting opportunities or a supplemental income source through guided hunts here in Texas. This divergence in perception leads to inconsistent participation in control programs. While one landowner invests heavily in trapping or aerial gunning, an adjacent neighbor may maintain hog populations intentionally for recreational purposes, or they may just be ignorant to the issues. The economic realities also influence engagement. Coordinated, sustained control is costly, often requiring thousands of dollars per year in equipment, feed, and aerial services. Many small acreage owners lack both financial and technical resources, or they rent land for grazing and have limited authority to implement control. In some regions, mistrust or limited communication among neighbors further restricts cooperation, especially where property lines are complex or absentee land ownership is common. With that, I'm going to let Jay take over from here.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Well, not to cover information he already touched on, but do want to just touch on a little bit of the Texas legal framework. As Dr. Blum said, Texas is going to be different than most of the states across the U.S. That's what makes the U.S. unique when we look at wildlife management, is that every state has its own agency that controls wildlife management, makes the laws, make the regulations. Here in Texas, we're unique in the fact that we classify feral pigs as exotic livestock. The big thing that kind of comes from that is it gives great leeway to individual landowners on how they decide to manage feral pigs on their property. It also means we have no real restrictions. There is no season, there is no bag limit, there's no restrictions on the means of take. We allow things such as toxicants and helicopter hunting for feral hogs. We also have a system governed by Texas Animal Health Commission that allows landowners to trap and sell the pigs live to make some money back. Texas is probably one of the most non-restrictive states in the terms of management of feral hogs. I will again note that system is probably not going to be right for every state in every situation, but it is a system we work within in Texas and kind of how we are informed on our management. So in the state here, we have 7 main management methods. That would be fencing, snaring, shooting, trained dogs, aerial gunning, toxicants, and trapping. Not all of these methods are probably going to be legal in every state across the U.S. And even the ones that are legal may have different rules or regulations involved with them than what we see here in Texas. But across the board, these are kind of the main management methods that have been developed for handling feral pigs across the U.S. and across the world. So starting with fencing, we have a couple different types. We have hard fencing, soft fencing, and exclusion fencing. With hard fencing, we're talking about your mesh, your hog panels, your high fencing. The upside of this is it can be 100% effective at stopping feral pig damage and intrusions. But the downside is that it must be constantly upkept due to weather and animal damage, and it is very expensive per linear foot to establish and to upkeep. And so when you talk about land fragmentation, when you talk about small acreage landowners, oftentimes this type of fencing may be out of their reach economically. It may not make sense for them to spend the amount of money that is required to build something like this. Going into soft fencing, that's your hot wire fencing. The downside to this is that it's never going to be 100% effective at stopping feral pig damage and intrusions. When we look into some of the studies across the topic, we see anywhere from about 60 to 70% effective or less, depending on the design and the landscape. The upside is that it is less expensive than traditional hard fencing. It's relatively easy to move, so you don't necessarily have to fence the whole property. You can fence high value parts of the property or parts of the property that you're seeing extensive damage. And when we talk about, again, fragmented landscapes, smaller landowners, this may be more feasible for them to input and help at least reduce some of the damage. And then the last one is exclusion fencing. This is a type of fencing used to keep feral pigs, feral hogs out of feed that's meant for wildlife and livestock. One of the big things we see with feral pigs is, one, they are a disease reservoir and a vector for disease, and two, supplemental food helps encourage their biology of putting more babies on the ground and recruiting more of those piglets into the sexually mature population. And so if we can reduce their access to food and reduce the time they spend around wildlife and livestock, this exclusion fencing helps do that. So off of non-lethal methods into lethal methods, snaring is the first one we're going to talk about. Now, laws around snaring are going to vary from state to state. This is a very good method for small acreage landowners and landowners who are new to managing of invasives, because it is relatively inexpensive and relatively easy to implement. They do pose a risk to non-targets, so it's going to be important for researchers, extension personnel, to provide education on how to reduce those non-target species, provide good resources for landowners and managers to access, to learn how to reduce those non-target species. And then something that we always recommend here in Texas is, if you're going to add snaring into your toolbox for management, go ahead and get that hunting license, because unfortunately, no matter how hard you try, if you do snaring for long enough, you will inevitably catch something that is not a pig. Also, it's important to note, and we've talked about it, we've touched on it a little bit, but feral hogs are just a very smart species. And so what we see on the landscape is, the more of these management methods we're able to do, more of these management methods we're able to get landowners to do, the more of an idea that the feral hogs get that they don't like it, that we don't like them. And so while that might not make a landscape effect on their population or their distribution, it can provide individual effects on decreasing damage and overall populations on individual properties. And oftentimes when working with landowners, you have to attack it at the individual level before you can get them thinking about the broader landscape as a whole. Moving into that next method will be shooting. Again, these laws will vary from state to state. Here in the state of Texas, we're very liberal as far as shooting goes. In fact, I tend to get a lot of boos at my talks when I tell them that shooting is not a population control method, because shooting tends to be, especially in Texas, the favorite way of dealing with pigs. I know it's a popular method for me. I enjoy doing it. But we have tons of research showing that hunting in general doesn't really create a population control method. You're not shooting enough pigs in the general hunting setting in order to create a population effect. But it is, again, effective at pressuring hogs out of areas for small chunks of time. It is a popular control method. So when we're looking at getting landowner buy-in and landowner participation, it's always going to be one that we want to talk about. And we can increase our success by new technologies like suppressors, night vision, thermals, where those things are legal across the US. Trained dogs. Again, trained dogs, dog hunting for pigs is going to look differently depending on what state you are in. It is another control method that has some very deep historical roots, especially in the southern portion of the US. There's a deep history of it here in Texas, and it has shown a solid form of control for Texas in populations. However, it is considered a low harvest method still. And as we see continued population changes in these states, continued people moving in to the states, people from urban areas moving into rural areas, continued fragmentation, we see a loss of areas, one, where people can run trained dogs, and two, we see an increase in the economy effect where people are able realize they're able to sell these hunts, and as such tend to wind up taking less pigs per hunting event because it's an economy, so they're making money on it. Onto aerial gunning. So we'll look at this from the public and the private side. Again, aerial gunning is going to be very state dependent. Not every state allows for it or has a private market for it. Here in Texas, we do. It is a very effective for removing large amounts of feral hogs off a property at one time. The downsides, though, is that as we continue to see greater habitat fragmentation, greater land trend changes, you're going to see the amount of properties that are capable of being aerial gunned go down. So when we look at something like 100 hectares of land that at one time could be aerial gunned, when it gets broken up into 10 or 20 different properties that are anywhere from 2 to 10 hectares, now those properties aren't able to be aerial gunned unless they all join together and agree. And so as we see more land fragmentation, we're going to see aerial gunning becoming more and more restrictive. It's also restrictive on the price. So if there is not a state or federal program going on, this can be very effective for landowners to get done. Current prices that I've looked at are anywhere from $1,800 to $2,400 an hour for flight time on a private contract. And so again, when we talk about small acreage landowners, landowners that maybe don't make money off their land, this may become economically not feasible for them to do. On a side note of it, there's also ongoing research. I've seen some published. I know that some is ongoing on the response of feral hogs to aerial gunning and the effects that that might have on follow-up treatments. Sliding into toxicants. Toxicants is an interesting talk because I know for most of you across the US, this is not a method that is available to you yet. In fact, as far as I know, the toxicant that has EPA approval, which is kaput, has limited access to just Texas and Oklahoma. I know I've talked to biologists in other states where they're looking at potentially making this available, but has not become commercially available as of yet. It is currently the only toxicant legal for use on the commercial market. It is found to be effective if used right. You must follow the protocol. You must use a specific feeder. Texas gave it its commercial label in 2024. It is a state limited use pesticide. So in the state of Texas, you are required to have a state applicator's license in order to buy it and use it. And there's also a manufacturer required training. It's only approved for use on pigs. And like I said before, you must use a specific feeder to distribute it. Surveillance is required by the landowner, and it's labeled for use on pastures, rangelands, forests, and non-crop areas. Where we see this as being potentially effective is an alternative method for metropolitan areas. So your suburban and urban areas where other means and methods are restricted because of your inability to dispatch pigs. So when you look at fragmented areas, suburban sprawl, areas where they don't have the ability to actually shoot pigs, this may become a popular method or a method that they can employ because it doesn't require the gun, but it is an expensive option. Some other considerations when we talk about toxicants, getting into human considerations, non-target species considerations, and secondary toxicity considerations. So for all three of them, it's harmful. It is a toxicant. When we look at humans, it's harmful if consumed. If it is consumed, you can treat it with vitamin K1. Just like any other herbicide or pesticide, when using it, you need to be using your basic personal protective equipment, long sleeves, long pants, closed-toed shoes, gloves. There is a blue dye in the bait as a safety. So that blue dye will dye the fatty tissues, the fluids, and the joints blue within 3 hours of first consumption, and it will remain blue for 2 to 3 weeks after last consumption. When we look at non-target species considerations, kaput is designed to be a low toxicity bait. It takes 5 to 7 days of consumption to deliver a toxic dose to pigs. Some of the studies that have been done on warfarin, which is the active ingredient, and other animals on the landscape, found that things such as dogs would have to eat 13.2 pounds of bait a day for 5 days. Cows would have to eat 3,520 pounds a day for 5 days. And turkeys would have to eat 29.3 pounds a day for 19 days to get toxic doses. When looking at secondary considerations, so these are what could happen to scavengers that eat the carcasses. Because of the low dose and quickly metabolizing, it should be safe for scavengers, and that's what we see in the studies. Studies done on this showed no effect on scavenger species consuming animals who were dosed with much higher doses than what's in kaput. Again, this is what the research shows us, but these are always considerations to be made at the local and state level, and looking at where it might play into that management toolbox across your state or your community. And then finally, trapping. I always leave trapping for last in all of my talks, and I did so here, because the research shows and decades of experience from extension personnel and landowners show that when we want to look at making a population effect across the landscape, trapping is going to be one of the best methods, not only for landowners, but for land managers across the board. With trapping, the advantages, it is highly effective. You can capture the whole sounder. You can combine it with every other method we've talked about here. The downsides are there is a time cost and a material cost. But I've learned through my experience working with landowners, you can usually kind of curtail those costs, make a trapping plan that will fit any landscape and any landowner. Looking at some other trapping considerations, there's multiple styles of traps. You have human activated, animal activated, and continuous traps. So when we look at animal activated, those are going to be your corral traps or your box traps as pictured here. When we look at human activated traps, those are usually corral style traps that have a camera that's operated from a phone. And then when we look at continuous traps, those are traps such as the pig brig itself that allows for trapping all night. They all have their downsides. They all have their upsides. It really needs to be evaluated by the landowner and the land manager, what's going to work best for them in their time frame, in their landscape, with the amount of money and the amount of time they have available to commit to the trapping operations. And then what do you do with the hogs once they're trapped? That's going to really depend on your state as well. When we look at Texas, you have a couple options. You can either dispatch the pigs in the trap, or you can load the pigs into a trailer and take them and sell them to make some money back on your efforts. Either way you choose, you need to be responsible and make sure that you are, one, dispatching all of the pigs if that's what you choose to do, We don't want to be releasing pigs or anything like that. And if you're loading pigs, you want to make sure you're loading them all and not letting some of them escape. And then also, when we look at dispatching pigs in any of these methods, we want to be mindful of where we're disposing of the carcasses. Now, every state's going to have its own rules and regulations around disposing of carcasses, but it's important to note, no matter what your rules and regulations are, we want to make sure we are disposing of these carcasses in a way that they can't further infect the landscape, wildlife, livestock, kids, pets, our water systems. So we want to be mindful of all of those things. And then jumping into landowner cooperation, I believe me and Dr. Blum are going to probably kind of tag team this landowner cooperation. But, you know, as states across the U.S. continue to see growing populations, urban and suburban sprawl moving into what was once rangelands or farmlands, and increased interactions with wildlife, the need for cooperation is going to continue to grow. Extension programs and county level initiatives have demonstrated that cooperative management through landowner associations, wildlife management cooperatives, and watershed partners can overcome many of the social and logistical barriers. I know a lot of this talk, when we talked about landowners, fragmentation, things like that, were focused on Texas, but you could really apply those to most of the states, especially across the southeastern portion of the US. All of these states are seeing increased population growth, increased urban and suburban sprawl, increased wildlife conflicts, and are all going to need a different approach to how we do cooperation throughout the state to manage pigs on a continually fragmented landscape. Some examples of cooperation are programs where experts can reach the general public. So the US as a whole is changing. Again, like I said, states are seeing more population growth, more urban centers, and then a trend of people wanting to move out of urban centers into rural settings. This is going to continue to increase people who do not have a direct connection to natural resources or wildlife, moving into areas where they will encounter wildlife conflict. It is important for us as researchers, extension personnel, and managers to create avenues for the public to reach out to us and get answers and resources for the problems they are facing. It's going to be important for extension personnel, especially to look at collaborative approaches for communities to combat issues such as feral hogs. Whether that be through the development of wildlife cooperatives for small acreage landowners to help share the burden of combating these issues, or providing information and resources for neighborhoods to make the best decision given their often limited options and funds. Along with this, I would encourage us all as professionals to be finding our replacement, as whether it be feral hogs or some other wildlife conflict, the issue will persist. And so some research needs and future directions. Looking ahead at the issue of feral hogs across the US, there are some research and management needs that jump out at us. First and foremost, continued research into the damage being caused by feral hogs and their potential as reservoirs for disease and vectors for disease spread is paramount, not only for the science, but for landowners and managers. Oftentimes, these two issues are the biggest influencers on funding and policy for the control of feral hogs. Also, as wildlife conflict continues to grow with the growth of our human populations, the relationship between research and extension needs to continue to grow with it. Oftentimes, extension personnel have a direct line to the problems being seen on the ground and the answers that landowners and managers have or want that could influence researchers' research and what they are studying. Conversely, extension personnel are usually understaffed and cover large areas, making research very hard for them to do. And they often rely on researchers for the most up-to-date science on the issues that landowners and managers are seeing on the ground. This relationship will have a big impact on the results we are able to make on feral hogs going forward. And with that, barring any more comments from Dr. Blum, some resources we have available. This is Dr. Blum's email, my email, a QR code to all of the resources Texas A&M Natural Resources Institute has available. Tons of publications, videos, social media, things that are readily available and ready to use for landowners and managers. You can follow that QR code, or you can go to the bit.ly website listed on there. And I think we'd be happy to answer any questions that there might be.
Thank you, Jay. I appreciate it. Marcus, it was excellent information. I guess to kick things off is Sean was pretty quick on the draw a little right after you get started, and has a question to begin, is that he's on a remote island and baiting is a problem where grain-based baits are not available. And so about the only thing that they've got to use there is offal. And he said wants to know what your take is on that as a bait.
I oftentimes will work with landowners and tell them to use what the pigs are eating if available. So I can tell you that I've worked on several landowners' places where the pigs won't even come to corn because there's some kind of something else, some other food source that maybe the rancher or farmer is growing or maybe naturally grows there. And that's what the pigs are used to eating. That's what the pigs want. And so I've been on several places where they've spent hundreds and hundreds of dollars on corn, filled up feeders, and the pigs come nowhere near it. So find what the pigs are eating on your island and use it, or find a close approximate to it that you can get your hands on. On something like that, the pigs might not even understand what corn is and might not be readily necessary wanting to come for it. So use what you have available, and I think you'll see some good success from it.
And to add on to that, think about like resource availability, like when things are most common on landscape, when there's just readily available food sources that they're really attracted to. It's going to be challenging to bait them anyways. So trying to focus those efforts on when there's resource limitations, so that actually kind of draws them in. So it's also that timing aspect in addition to finding what they're actually going to utilize.
One addition to that is using offal like that is I would think that just being cautious and making sure that it's only getting to the pigs, where if you have any other companion animals that may be in the area or anything like that, and there could be a disease concern there, where you're sourcing that information or that bait from. The other thing that comes to mind is on an island is that those pigs, I'm sure, eat a lot of fish and crustaceans that just wash up on the shoreline there, and depending on what the island setting is there, a lot of times you can find places that process those aquatic critters that got some disposal there that you can pick that up from, source it from local providers. So but yeah, it's definitely exactly what y'all are saying. Just use what the pigs are eating. So I think the next question is coming in too, Abby. I don't want to jump in front of you. Is I know we only have a couple of minutes to take some questions. Is that it says, by what method would one trailer captured hogs caught in a pig brig? I think I can answer that one. And Jay, I don't know how much y'all trailer the live ones or not, or anything like that, but I know that just typically a livestock trailer, just they'll back the livestock trailer up to that pig brig. One thing is that whenever you set that pig brig up, just make sure that you think to orient the seam of that pig brig to the direction you'll be backing in with that trailer. So make that seam appropriately positioned. Others, what they'll do is put a guillotine style gate in the pig brig itself while they're putting it up. That way, whenever they back their trailer into that location, they can just pull that gate up to load directly into that pig brig. Or what others do is that they will attach load panels, just like what you would use as like a chute to load cattle. They'll attach load panels to the posts on the pig brig. and then those load panels are able to swing to orient it to wherever you back the trailer up. It doesn't have to be exactly perfect. You orient those panels to where the gate of the trailer is, and the same thing. You just pull the seam, open up the trap, and run the pigs in that way. So nothing specific on the trailer itself, just anything that you can get into the area. But one thing I would definitely draw caution to is that if you're loading up wild pigs into a livestock trailer that you may otherwise use to haul livestock, is just remember what the guy said earlier, is that pigs can be a disease reservoir. So it very well could be that if you're loading pigs into a trailer that would be used for livestock later, you need to spend a little bit of time getting that trailer cleaned up really good as much as possible before you put the next load of cattle in there. The other thing comes to mind is just also too, wouldn't be a bad idea to wash the tires off on that trailer really well with a bleach solution or something like that, because pigs that have spent time around a conditioning trap probably have left some feces around there, anything like that, could be shedding diseases on the outside of that trap that they could end up with contamination on your trailer. So if you're using the same trailer for livestock purposes as you do to haul pigs, definitely clean it up. So
Can I make one other,
Abby, with that rambling, I haven't watched the last few questions come in. What do we got on the
can I make one
question?
other
Yeah,
point on the
yeah,
loading?
go ahead, Jay.
I recommend this for no matter how you're loading or what trap you're loading from. First and foremost, don't let the first time you back a trailer up to a trap be the first time you have pigs in it. It will not go good for you or anyone else. You really need to test fit that trailer with the trap you're using. And another piece of advice I give to people is once you've test fitted it, you figured out how it's going to work, how you're going to load everything, how everything needs to set, put a T-post on either side of that trailer. And now every time you go to load pigs, you back that trailer in between those T-posts. It makes it quick, it makes it easy, and it helps reduce mistakes.
The chat side, it says about the marketing the live pigs is there a medium size that the hogs have to be for the market to accept them, and if you're paying for live pigs, does it turn into its own business and so forth? I know for Texas guys, it's Texas Animal Health Commission is the governing body over wild pigs, and typically the individual holding facility will set their base, and usually from my experience has been 50 pounds or more. That's where you're going to be looking at as far as a market, a purchased pig. Not much there for those smaller animals. The only thing is you got to make sure that you're licensed through the Texas Animal Health Commission as far as being a holding facility. Just the general public can't go purchase pigs. So it's going to have to be through that holding facility, and reaching out to them to find out what their market is. They'll let you know what size they're accepting. Big hogs typically come with a bonus, so a couple of different perks there. But as far as laws are concerned, definitely reach out to the Texas Animal Health Commission. They have a tab on their website that gives you all the laws and regulations on wild pigs. On the permitting side, the markets, the holding facilities set their own market.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean it depends also from like something be abused from like people trying to just make money on it. I had guys growing up just in high school when we run dogs. After a while, they started just you take the live pigs and then they'd sell them. You pull them out of the brush and whatnot. But I mean, it's a cost benefit analysis for people. I feel like if you get a good enough sounder, I mean, it's just in the trap easy enough to load them up and make a little bit, and it can help pay for some of your corn and offset some of those costs and whatnot.
Absolutely. Well, it looks like we have like a little bit more time for maybe one more question. So right here, I have one from Susan. She says, I'm in a mountain community in Western North Carolina. This year has been particularly bad. The pig brig worked on 2 sounders, but not more. They annihilated my yard with rooting, up new trees, plantings, etc. It's an area about 50 by 20 feet, and I use an electric fence with some success.
You said it's about 50 by 20 feet.
Hmm.
I think yeah, I mean, fencing that's a small enough area that, I mean, if it works for your costs and you can afford it, electric fencing, even if you're willing to put something a little bit more permanent, like, welded wire, mesh wire, or something that you can get it into the ground a little bit, or even lay it a little flat and stake it into the ground so that if they try and root under it, keeps them out. But the electric fencing, it should work at least for a while. I mean, they may, with any sort of fencing, they're going to test it, but I think it'd be fine. Jay or Aaron, do y'all have any other comments on that or disagreements?
No, I think the small acreage like that is where fencing works the best because it makes a nice, it reduces the cost of it. And so um, now electric fencing is the route I would go if you have plans for that area, or if you use that area, or if kids run and play it in the summer, you can take it down. If like Dr. Bloom said, if you want to go a little bit more permanent and you don't mind that, then go with a exclusion fence. It'll be more effective, but it will cost a little bit more, and there'll be some more upkeep.
I want to say
Gotcha.
4x2 welded wire is like $120 a roll. I only know that because I've been putting up on some of our parts of our property lately. I get to do it this weekend.
Oh, sounds like fun. Well, I think that's all the time we have for questions this evening. So, Marcus and Jay, we really appreciate you guys for being here with us and sharing your wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much for the time that you guys put into this and your presentation. And I really enjoyed getting to learn from you guys, as I'm sure our guests that are people who joined did as well. And speaking of, thank you to everyone who's joined here tonight, or not tonight, today on their lunch break. Sorry, we normally do this in the evenings. So thank you for joining with us today on your lunch break. And as a reminder, this webinar has been recorded and you will receive a recording in the next couple of weeks. So keep an eye out for that. We also send out like reminders for other upcoming webinars. We have one upcoming in the end of the month. So keep an eye out for that as well. So thanks again to our guests for joining us and for everyone else who joined us. We hope you guys have a great rest of your day. Awesome. Thank you guys.
Appreciate it,
Yeah,
guys.
thanks
Thank
for
you for
having
your
us.
time.